Brother, oh brother.
These videos are satiric reviews. You don't have to agree, but don't bitch about it.
I hate this channel.
All I know today is that one thing that's not going to revolve around this belt for a long time is going to be Shawn Michaels.
With all due respect, that is bullshit!
Hey there, I'm Social Injustice Warrior Vin Fuso, with another overused opening of mine, but you know who one of my all-time favorite wrestlers was? Shawn Michaels. I mean, growing up, on some level, I kinda idolized the guy. And it wasn't because of his entrance gear. I mean, be that the case, I would have idolized the biker from the Village People. But instead, I just questioned his grooming decisions because who wears a mustache like that knowingly? Maybe my idolization of Shawn came from the fact that he was a scrawny little white boy with long hair, and at the time, I was a scrawny little white boy with long hair. My, how times have changed. But even looking back now, I'm still thoroughly impressed as to what Shawn could do in between the ropes. Not only was he one of the most gifted athletes to ever step foot in a wrestling ring, making it to the tip top of many different greatest wrestler of all times lists, but he was also just as charismatic as he was talented. He wasn't just a showman, but the showstopper. He could captivate a crowd like no other. Shawn was a one-of-a-kind performer who could get the WWF crowd to emote, which is not something all wrestlers can do. I mean, even when you hated him, you really just hated how much you loved him, in a completely heterosexual way. You know what, on second thought, no, I take that back. There's clearly nothing heterosexual going on here.
Being gay in our business is very 80s.
In all seriousness, even in real life outside of the world of kayfabe, Shawn has been recognized for his undoubted star power. In the Wrestling Observer, he earned Match of the Year in 1994, 2008, 2009, and 2010. He was voted the most charismatic wrestler of 1995 and 1996, and was honored as Tag Team of the Year with Marty Jannetty in 1989 as The Rockers. Whereas in Pro Wrestling Illustrated, he had Match of the Year from 1993 to 1996, and then again from 2004 to 2010. He was ranked number 1 in the top 500 single stars in 1996, and he hit the top 10 again in 2003. He also headlined the WWE Hall of Fame class of 2011. The man is one of the most iconic figures in all of sports entertainment, having a career with its fair share of fame and infamy. And today we're here to talk about the latter. You see, Shawn Michaels won multiple titles during his extended run with the company, becoming a 6-time tag team champion, a 3-time intercontinental champion, a 1-time European champion, and a 4-time world champion. Winning title belts didn't seem to be a challenge for Shawn. It was getting him to lose them that was.
I don't give away belts for anybody.
Now, it's no secret to anyone who shared a locker room with Shawn during the 90s or early 2000s that he could be a little bit difficult to work with. And that's putting it mildly. I mean, let's be honest, what major main eventer hasn't been? Have you heard what people say about Hogan? Did you watch my video and listen to what I said about Hogan? Now, what you may not know about Shawn is that once you put a title on him, he never wants to take it off. As far as I'm concerned, I'm pretty sure he showered in those things. And if you don't believe me, in 1993, Shawn was the reigning defending Intercontinental Champion. But due to a steroid scandal that Shawn still denies to this day, he was forced to drop the belt. Now, being the champion at the time of his suspension, the company was forced to take the title off him. Though when they called and asked him to send the belt back, because the champions do take the belts home with them, this way they can bring them show to show, and Shawn, I don't know if you're aware of this, I know that they gave it to you, but it's not your fucking belt. It's the company's. It's their property. They paid for it. That is theirs. Come on, Shawn, just give the nice man in the suit with football shoulder pads his toy back. Michaels adamantly refused, causing the company to either rush to have a new one made, or to use a replica of the IC title in his absence. That belt, of course, would go to Razor Ramon, and would lead to a feud with Michaels as to who the undisputed Intercontinental Champion really was. In 1994, Shawn won the tag team titles with his partner Diesel. You may remember we've mentioned this on here on the channel before. The two rarely ever defended their belts, and they'd wind up vacating them after the team split. Shawn would become Intercontinental Champion yet again, before forfeiting the title due to an injury from getting beat down in a bar in Syracuse. Though some of his co-workers and those close to Shawn dispute the legitimacy of this injury, with many claiming that this was Shawn not wanting to put the next guy over. It's important to note that that night Dean Douglas would be granted the title before having it taken off him later in the same show by Shawn's close friend and buddy, Razor Ramon.
Championship around his waist. And what a matchup that would have been. Forfeiting the Intercontinental Championship to Gorilla Monsoon in a very classy manner.
That same year, he and Diesel would reunite and win the tag team titles. But due to a technicality, they would immediately have the title stripped from them and vacated. Which at this point, I can only imagine that backstage this was known as the Shawn Michaels Special. Michaels would win back his WWF Championship in 1997, only to almost immediately vacate it the following month for nagging injuries, and for losing his smile.
As you are facing a knee operation, what's going through your head?
It seems like we've done this before. I may never be able to wrestle again. You know, here you go. Here's your belt. And I know that over the last several months, I've lost a lot of things, and one of them has been my smile. And I have to go back and I have to find my smile, because somewhere along the line, I lost it.
Now, even more than his injury from the beating he'd received in Syracuse, this is a very controversial and debated topic, as a lot of wrestlers and wrestling fans alike believe that Michaels either faked or exaggerated his injury in order to get out of having to lose his title to his real-life rival Bret the Hitman Hart, who was scheduled to become the next WWF champion. The timing of all this, well, it makes it a little suspect, doesn't it? I mean, the guy's got a track record, he's got a bad attitude backstage, doesn't want to put the next guy over. It just kind of all paints a very unflattering picture.
Austin, and he couldn't quite get it done.
Phony little faker, why don't you take your little pussyfoot injury?
No. It's all right. I'm not going anywhere.
Go back and find your smile.
Michaels would again win the tag team titles with Stone Cold Steve Austin as the two were in the midst of a feud. And as you might have guessed, they'd have to drop the titles before they could lose them. This time because Shawn got into a fight backstage with Bret Hart and was promptly suspended. September of 97, Shawn would become European champion. Following this was another WWF title run, making him a dual champion at the time, which I'm sure did wonders for his ego. Shawn would carry both belts until authority figure and rival Sergeant Slaughter would try to get one over on the team of HBK and Triple H by demanding that Shawn put his European title up on the line against his teammate later that night.
You haven't defended that title in over 60 days.
In case you haven't noticed, chump change, I've been busy. I'm the World Wrestling Federation champion, and don't you forget it.
You're either going to defend that title here tonight on Raw, or I'm going to strip you of that title here tonight on Raw. Your opponent tonight will be Hunter Hearst.
Michaels would lose that match, but only because he willingly laid down and let his best friend pin him. So, it doesn't really count as a legitimate loss. It's okay, guys. Shawn still looks good. It's fine. No need to worry. He's still got his spot.
Ask George Bailey, not Shawn Michaels. You got to hand it to him.
It's not easy.
They pulled the wool right over our eyes.
He's defeated for the covenant. European title.
They got us.
Never has any match been so emotionally, physically, and mentally draining. I love you, man.
He's lost his smile.
This is the greatest moment of my life. You son! I did it! I did it!
God forbid he lose the title once and put the next guy over. God forbid. God forbid. And lastly, Shawn Michaels would win the world title off of Bret, in a controversial fashion to say the least. But injuries would lead to an early, temporary retirement. Michaels would main event that year's WrestleMania against the star-in-the-making Stone Cold. What I want to point out here is that Michaels did lose that match, and he lost it fair and square. There was no There's no mind games, there was no laying down, there was no vacating of the titles. He went in there, put on a good match, and lost the belt. But if the persistent rumor and backstage stories are to be believed, he had very little intention on doing so. Or at the very least, little desire in putting Stone Cold over. One story claims that The Undertaker, a backstage locker room leader, would threaten Shawn to do the job while menacingly taping his wrists. And why is it all the good stuff in wrestling is never recorded? Anyways, you could see, the vast majority of time Shawn was to lose a title, it was very rarely ever in an actual loss. He either forfeited, vacated, or handed over the belt himself. And sure, you could write this off as bad booking and unfortunate timing, but his colleagues' stories and his well-known shit attitude and brat behavior would say otherwise. And I want to point out that even the times he did lose the strap, they kind of seem a little suspect. He'd lose the belt to Psycho Sid, who he'd regain it back from the following January. The same goes for an Intercontinental title reign, which saw him lose the title to Marty Jannetty and quickly regain it back after. Also, see, I'm sorry, I misbetrayed him, alright? The guy doesn't mind losing the belt, just as long as you give it back in record time. What a class act. That guy is a team player. Give him a jersey. Another weird statistic here is how often the British Bulldog is included in his title history. You see, he won the tag team titles off him, beat him for the European Championship and the Intercontinental title. And look, I'm not saying that Davey Boy Smith was a main eventer, because he wasn't. You know, at least not in the States. When they travel to the UK, then give him a title match, you know? But come on, didn't he deserve better than this? I mean, he basically became Shawn's whipping boy. I mean, he's the guy who they pay to job out to Shawn Michaels. I mean, as long as he was making money, I think that's what's most important, but still, guy deserved better. I think just having to share a locker room with Shawn Michaels might be Purple Heart worthy. Let me say now that I'm sure that there's plenty of you bitching in the comment section about how I'm not being fair, but neither was Shawn, so you know what they say about turnabout being fair play. But that's the nature of the business. I want to emphasize that Shawn Michaels is still to this day maybe my all-time favorite wrestler. I still admire the guy's work, and have many fond memories of watching him on TV growing up. However, with that being said, the man behind the scenes was different than the man on our screens. This isn't to say that Shawn was a bad person, but the man during that period of his life personified the word diva. He didn't want to lose his belts to look bad in a fictional wrestling contest. And the fact that he got away with all this, and is still considered one of, if not the greatest of all time, is really just a credit to how impressive he truly is. So Shawn, thanks for the memories. Even the bad ones. You know what? Especially the bad ones, actually. They're celebrated here. Thank you, Shawn. You've done so much for yourself.
By what it is what it is. What it is what it is, brother.
And you remember way back when I spoke with Shawn Michaels and he didn't particularly like losing titles? Well, he's far from the first or last wrestler to let their own hype get to their head. No. You see, the world of wrestling is actually full of egomaniacs and narcissists. And unfortunately, it's usually those people who get strapped to a rocket and sent to the top. I mean, not always, but mostly. And I can think of no one who personifies that statement more. No one who is more known for being at the top of the game. No one whose delusions amp their own egomania than
Hulk Hogan. Hulk Hogan. Hulk Hogan. Hulk Hogan. Hulk Hogan. Hulk Hogan. Hulk Hogan.
Now, you also may remember in the past that we've discussed him. Here's the highlight reel of that video.
You played bass, and you, how did you audition for Metallica?
They needed a bass player, and I was coming off a roll from not hearing back from the Rolling Stones.
The weird thing I always found about Hogan is he's achieved so much in the business, yet he had to make things up in his book.
Not a Hulk Hogan thing, and I thank you very much. Cliche, but it's not me. It really isn't.
Hulk Hogan has arrived! Hulk Hogan back in the impact zone! I don't think things went according to the way that Hulk Hogan thought they were going to go down here. Hulk Hogan!
And so I don't like talking about Hulk Hogan's penis, but I've already tried to explain to you, I gave up my right as Hulk Hogan to have Hulk Hogan have any privacy.
Hulk Hogan once claimed that he was offered a contract in the UFC.
That he used to wrestle Pride fighters back in the 70s.
He's also said he was supposed to be the lead in The Wrestler.
He was once scouted by both the New York Yankees and the Cincinnati Reds.
The George Foreman grill was supposed to be the Hulk Hogan grill. He once claimed that he wrestled 400 days a year. He claimed to outdrink John Belushi after WrestleMania 2.
You were discussing the length of your penis on Bubba's radio program. Any doubt?
Well, it's not mine, because mine isn't that size, but we were discussing the length of Hulk Hogan's.
Seriously? So, you
No, seriously, I do not have a 10-inch.
You see, I could spend the time here talking about all the times Hogan's ego screwed over up-and-coming talent or people who were in line to get a push. Today I'm just going to show you how Hogan's love for himself completely derailed almost all of Macho Man's major achievements. Our story begins at WrestleMania 4, when the Macho Man Randy Savage competed in and won a 14-man tournament for the vacated WWF Championship. Also competing in that tournament was on-screen best bud, Hulk Hogan, who took on Andre the Giant in a rematch of their legendary WrestleMania 3 encounter. Except this time they'd end the match in a double disqualification, meaning that neither man would be going to the main event. Of course that didn't matter because they actually would. They actually both would anyway. Andre would appear in the corner of his current mentor, the $1 Million Man, Ted DiBiase, and Hogan would appear alongside his Mega Powers partner, Randy Savage. During the match when things looked a little grim for Macho Man, Hogan swooped into the ring in his best friend's defense and hit the $1 Million Man with a chair, allowing Macho Man to hit his elbow drop and get the 3 count. Macho won his first world championship because of a Hogan interference. I mean, Hulk basically went in there and won the belt for him, and he celebrated as such following the match.
The respect that she so rightly deserves. Now she's hoisted up on the shoulder with the...
Of course, the following year at WrestleMania 5, Hogan would actually find himself in the main event match across the ring from Macho Man, who he would beat for that same championship. Fast forward to WrestleMania 8, when Macho Man would once again compete for and win the WWF Championship off the Nature Boy Ric Flair. And what a legendary match. What a main event on the biggest show of the year. Except it wasn't. It wasn't the main event that year. Because despite being a match between two of the all-time greats, and that match being contested for the company's grand prize, and this being the Super Bowl of wrestling, only comes once a year, big celebration, it was decided that a much better main event would be Sid Justice against, you guessed it, Hulk Hogan. Hulk Hogan. And not only was that a main event that nobody asked for, that was a match that nobody wanted. Macho would eventually switch companies, following Hogan into the WCW, and winning his first WCW World Championship at World War III 1995, becoming the last man standing out of 60 men. Except he wasn't, because Hogan also wasn't eliminated in that match. If word of mouth is to be believed, it seems that Hogan was initially booked to get thrown over the top rope, thus being eliminated by a pre-Big Show giant. Hogan mid-match called a mulligan, using his extra stroke in the company to call a change of booking. On the fly. On live pay-per-view. In the main event. Gotta love that creative control. Gotta love it. I mean, it's not like that's a useful utility that someone could use to, that somebody could use and abuse irrationally and unprofessionally. Hogan demanded that Giant pull Hogan out from the bottom rope, thus not actually eliminating him, so that this way he could lay claim to Macho Man's belt. And good call, Hulkster. I mean, we wouldn't want to make you look bad. You're just one of the biggest stars that the industry has ever conjured up. You have a wrestling resume unrivaled and have been as big a part of pop culture as you have wrestling. But yeah, no, you're right. If you let the Giant, a guy 3 times your size, eliminate you in a claustrophobic 60-man Royal Rumble, that would definitely be the end of your career. I mean, you're not an egomaniac, you're just looking out for yourself. You gotta stay strong, Why put other people over when you still have a couple more years in the biz? Why not just make it all about you? It's better that way. Hogan would then proceed to interrupt Macho Man's celebration to claim that he wasn't eliminated, and that he was taken out of the match unfairly, to the dismay of everyone in attendance and me watching at home.
Randy Savage, we've got to congratulate you. You are the new WCW World Heavyweight Champion.
Before I say anything, Macho Man, I'm gonna ask everybody in here, did I go under the bottom or not?
You should be basking right now in your victory here tonight.
Bottom line, this is my dream. I told you that when I came into the WCW. You didn't go over the top rope, and I didn't go over the top rope.
Hogan spent the better part of what was initially booked as a Macho Man celebratory segment to whine and bitch about an ending he booked himself. It should be mentioned that throughout Macho's run with the belt, Hogan was mostly present, making run-ins for his friend and making his title run equally about himself. Because in Hogan's long, storied, tenured career, the only person he knew how to put over was himself. Because Hogan would not give up the spotlight, and it would wind up casting a shadow over Macho Man's career. In January of '96, Mach would once again regain the WCW Championship. And who was by his side? You guessed it, Hulk Hogan. Hogan celebrated as if he was the one who won the belt. And this got under the skin of Savage, who finally took to calling him out on his bullshit. Hogan laughed the notion off and acted as if Macho Man was overreacting. But you know something? He's kind of not. I mean, you're just kind of a dick, aren't you? Maybe not do that. Maybe be a professional. Out of all my favorite Macho Man promos, this might top the list because this feels the most real. And to be fair, you know, it probably actually is.
You're celebrating this match like you won it. I won it. You're clowning around the ring. Don't embarrass yourself like that, brother. I am the WCW World Heavyweight Champion. Congratulations on being the new heavyweight champion, brother. But I might add, with a little help from your best friend, man, I would love to have the first shot at the title, brother.
2 years later, Savage would pick up another world title win at Spring Stampede, defeating Sting to become the holder of the big gold belt. That run would be short-lived, however, because Hogan would beat him and win the title the very next day. The following year, Savage would once again become world champion at Bash at the Beach, before once again losing it the very next night to guess. No. I'm not gonna tell you. Guess. I want you to guess. Go ahead. First name that comes to mind is probably the right one. Go ahead. Let's see what you got. That's right. Hulk Mr. Nanny Hogan. And you see this? You see that? You see that spray tan banana over there? That is why we can't have nice things. Thank you. Hogan, if there was a trophy big enough to award you, I would, because I just want to thank you for all that you've done, not for wrestling, but for yourself. And holy shit, all of this was brutal to get through. I mean, it's like trying to watch one of my videos. I don't know why you people do it, but you like to torture yourselves, and you know what, it's 2020, I think, when I'm putting this video out, so, you know, I'm not gonna kink shame. Macho Man, despite all he's accomplished, all he's ever done, didn't really get the chance to emote what being world champion felt like. Because Hogan was too busy doing that. Hogan was always there to make it just enough about himself to make you want to tear the last remaining follicles of hair from your and Hulk Hogan's heads. Now I get that a lot of people are going to say, V, wrestling's fixed. It's worked. Hogan didn't have a hand in any of that. He was just doing his job. Bullshit. And if you're saying that, maybe you don't know Hulk Hogan. Or strike that, maybe you know Hulk Hogan, but maybe you're unaware of Terry Bollea, the man behind the gimmick. This is a guy who went to management and said, Brett versus Yokozuna is a main event. It's just not gonna cut it, brother. Put me in there after and let me take the belt off the big guy. This is a guy who went to management and said, hey, you know that Brian Pillman dude, brother? He's really getting over, man. Put him in the Tower of Doom match so I can squash him. Hogan's place in nearly all of Macho Man's title victories is no coincidence. It's not a questionable booking decision made by others. It was Hogan lobbying that he was more important. Even more important than whoever was holding the belt. Time and time again. And Macho Man is far from the last career Hogan's fingerprints would wind up all over. But that's a story for a different time. Is there anything better in wrestling than seeing the guy from the past generation coming back to face the guy from this generation? I mean, think of the dream matches from Hulk Hogan facing The Rock, to Shawn Michaels facing his best friend Triple H, to Hulk Hogan facing Shawn Michaels. And if you'd like to dive further into the topic, I mean, there's plenty more, like when The Rock came back to face John Cena twice in a lifetime. In 2005, Shawn Michaels came up with and suggested a feud that he probably now regrets. Shawn thought out a dream feud between himself, the Heartbreak Kid, the Icon, the main event, the showstopper, Mr. WrestleMania, the man who commanded D-Generation X, one of the most charismatic men the wrestling industry has ever seen, the greatest showman in the business, going one-on-one with the world's first real superhero, the Unstoppable Force, the face of the Rock and Wrestling Connection, the godfather of the NWO, the man who defines the word legend, an icon in the industry and in pop culture. He is undoubtedly the biggest star the business has ever produced, having a level of fame unparalleled. Despite Mr. Nanny and Santa with muscles, the immortal Hulk Hogan. Now, for those of you who are fans of my channel, you VTards or whatever you people are calling yourselves nowadays, may remember that recently both men have been featured in videos of mine. Videos that told the story of who these men were backstage behind the scenes. While they're both two of the biggest icons the industry has ever produced, they without a doubt have two of the biggest egos the industry has ever produced. You may remember Shawn Michaels. For all the titles he's won, he hasn't been one to lose them gracefully, choosing instead to leave the ring time and time again as opposed to sticking around and rightfully putting someone else over. While Hulk Hogan also similarly demanded that he be the sole center of attention. I mean, just look at this man's skin. Does it look like he lets anybody else in the spotlight? Hogan's need to be the guy often meant disaster for others, especially on-screen close friend Macho Man Randy Savage. And every single world title that Mach would win, the win would immediately become more about Hogan than Randy himself. Now that's savage. Both men were what one would consider politicians behind the scenes, bearing a plethora of talent in an effort to continually put themselves over. And they were able to get away with it in their respective heydays, and also Hogan long after his, because the two developed a historied relationship with the boss, Vince McMahon. So it would definitely be interesting to see what would happen when these two icons went head-to-head on many different levels. The story would begin as HBK was feuding with anti-Americans Muhammad Hassan and Shawn Daivari. And in a 2-on-1 story, Shawn needed to find a partner, which honestly shouldn't be a problem. I mean, he could have easily asked Triple H, Marty Jannetty, or even Big D to come in and help him out. Hell, if he was really in dire need, he probably could have called X-Pac or somebody.
At Backlash, I have to pick a tag team partner. If I have to pick a tag team partner, I'm going to pick somebody that feels as passionately about this as I do. If I have to pick a tag team partner, I want that tag team partner to be Hulk Hogan.
Why? But no. Instead, he enlisted the help of Hulk Hogan, prompting a return from the then 52-year-old. The two legends made quick work of the newer talent in what ultimately was a glorified squash match. It may be a little bit less than glorified, actually.
Later. Hulk Hogan, John Cena, and Shawn Michaels meeting Chris Jericho, Christian, and the Bison Tomko here and in this match. Involved that. Yes, man. How do you feel that? Well, versus Michaels. Look out. Christian. Oh my God. Right hand.
Was the best I'd ever seen, but last night they typed an adventure.
WWE champion as we speak. Heard his music. We actually saw him here tonight. And Michaels.
Unbelievable. They do.
And Jericho.
Look out. Uh-oh. Here it comes.
And there's John Cena. John Cena. Taking Jericho. Down. No. Powerful right.
The WWE Champion John Cena, Shawn Michaels, and
Hogan would appear again to solidify him being an American hero on the 4th of July episode of Raw, where Kurt Angle and Carlito, odd combination, proceeded to make remarks about him and his daughter. And we all know Papa Hogan just ain't gonna let that fly, brother. Shawn would come to the Hulkster's aid, setting up a match between the four men later that night. It was a match that Shawn and Hogan would unsurprisingly win. But that was only the setup to the real story. After the match, the Hulkster celebrated in the ring, hot-dogging and grandstanding in a way that only he could do, inviting Shawn Michaels to join him. And that's when Shawn Michaels tuned up the band and played some sweet chin music. Michaels would proceed to challenge Hogan to an official match, which Hogan, being who he is, obviously accepted. Now, as the story goes, Shawn initially pitched this idea as a face versus face, a good guy versus good guy feud, built up out of the love of the sport, the need for competition, and the desire to know who was the better man. That idea would be completely turned on its face when Hogan vetoed it, instead asking that Shawn turn heel, something he hadn't successfully done since 1998. McMahon caved in, and Michaels was very quickly and very radically made the bad guy in the confrontation. And while I won't say he was unsuccessful during this stint, I mean, there definitely were some moments of brilliance from Shawn at the time, like that Larry King interview.
Ladies and gentlemen, tonight, the immortal Hulk Hogan. Are you a bad guy or a good guy?
Well, on camera, brother, I'm a great guy. But when that camera goes off, brother, let me tell you something, brother. I'll be 102 years old, brother. Every day the Hulkster wakes up that he's not dead, brother. He's living on bonus time. Brother, brother. What you gonna do, brother? Grab. Hulk Hogan, you've got your reality show. What are you gonna do when reality kicks you right in the face?
But it was so weird seeing the man that Shawn Michaels had become, trying to act more like the man he once was. It was similar to when DX reformed a few years later. It was just strange seeing Shawn and Hunter try to act and react to things like they were in their 20s and 30s again. It just came across as fake. And that's saying something because we're talking about wrestling here. But apparently that wasn't all Hogan vetoed in the feud, as Shawn's concept focused on a best-of-3 series between the two Hall of Famers. The first one going to Shawn, the next one going to Hogan, and the third one ending in a draw. Or basically just something to that extent. Hogan, however, thought it would be best if he just got the W and walked back off into the night. Now just to remind you here, Shawn was still an active full-time performer despite his legend status at the time. He wasn't on that Brock Lesnar contract, he was there every Monday night, and Sundays for pay-per-views. He was the guy who was still showing up multiple times on a weekly basis. And Hogan, at 52 years old, was not. Hogan was a guy who came in from time to time. He showed up, maybe he gave somebody a big boot, maybe a leg drop, went home, that was it. Usually not in matches, too. Eventually, close to bell time, Hogan informed Shawn and Vince that he was only returning for this one-off match as opposed to the initially conceived series of matches. This obviously infuriated Shawn, and he'd get his revenge in the greatest and goofiest sabotage of all time. During the match, Shawn time and time again oversold Hogan's offense to comedic levels, obviously showing his dismay with the situation by making his opponent and himself in the matter look stupid. Shawn realized Hogan's ego overshadowed and overpowered anything else in the business, still unwilling to put over talent despite the fact that he no longer had anything to gain from it, while others, like Shawn, did. And Shawn decided to show just how overpowered Hogan was by jobbing out in a spectacular fashion. While Shawn did get some offense in, the majority of the match, like the majority of most Hulk Hogan matches, was really centered on the Hulkster being the Hulkster. This show was a Hogan showcase. The man couldn't just accept a loss at the hands of one of the greatest, and still active at the time, wrestlers, despite no longer being an active wrestler. He couldn't just happily accept the chance of being in the spotlight one last time. This was the main event in a pay-per-view that is the biggest show of the summer and one of the biggest shows of the year. In his 50s. Just take the L on screen and jot it as a W off it. What's wrong with you? Why can't you do that? That is an offer that nobody else in any situation in wrestling would be made. Anyway, throughout the match, Shawn flailed around the ring like a goddamn magic cart, when he wasn't being thrown around like a rag doll. It's goofy, it's stupid, but it sure got the point across, didn't it? Ultimately, the match did nothing for either man, as a win over Shawn didn't increase Hogan's star power at the time, because he was already at the height of it. I mean, once you slam Andre and, create the NWO, what else can you do that's going to put you over the top? That's it. You've done it. You've succeeded. Congratulations. And the match with Hogan didn't do anything to help Shawn's career either, because now, active wrestler on the roster has just taken a loss from somebody who is no longer wrestling. I know I might have mentioned that a couple times, but it really just, it gets to me. It bothers me. Shawn the next night would have the final laugh at his own and Hogan's expense, stating that the power of Hulkamania was just too much for him, brother, before turning face once again and forgetting that whole 98.2 stint altogether. Which I would say might be for the best, but honestly, come on. Who would want to forget this? I know I don't. And I know I won't. Look at that. Look at that. How could you? It's a masterpiece.
Well, let me tell you something, brother. You're watching the social injustice warrior V Infuso's channel, dude. So if you like the words that came out of his mouth hole and you too want to become a V-tard, don't forget to like and subscribe and click that little bell icon to get updates and notifications. Ooh, tell him what up, Mach. Ooh, yeah. Follow the man on Twitter, yeah, because we all know it's not stalking if it's on the internet, yeah. Join the madness by joining the Discord, and if you have a moment of time and a free $1 to spare, head over to the SIJW's Patreon, dig it, where you can request videos, get exclusive videos, and early access to content, yeah. Or go down to PayPal, where you can buy the shirts, brother. But most importantly, just remember, if you're not tuning in, then you're missing out.